Hi, everyone. My name's Christine. I'm a photographer living in San Francisco. Thank you again to New Muse for hosting this event. It's been wonderful to be a part of this exhibit and be given the chance to speak with so many talented artists. I draw from my connection to the landscape, incorporating my historic preservation training into my artistic practice. Photographing with film and printing in traditional and historic processes. My work focuses on cultural landscapes with themes of time and the relationship between humans and these fragile places. This is my piece that's included in the exhibit, a detail from the travertine terraces at Yellowstone National Park, taken in the summer of 2019 and printed in April of 2020. It's a handmade cyanotype print toned with star anise. Like many of the other artists during the 2020 shelter in place, I didn't have access to my studio and darkroom. Immediately, this wave of anxiety came over me. I knew it would be difficult because I work completely in the darkroom. So how could I continue to create work? And what would I do if I couldn't? While previously participating in artist residencies without access to a darkroom, I would work in historic printing processes. Next slide, please. The piece on the left is a handmade cyanotype print of an image taken in Joshua Tree National Park. It was created in 2018 while I was an artist in residence at Dorland Mountain Arts Colony in Temecula, California. I had several rolls of film from visits to Joshua Tree and Yellowstone that I hadn't done much with, but knew the imagery would lend itself to the cyanotype process. I focused on the characteristics of the land that make it so diverse: geologic formation details, isolated portraits of Joshua trees, and stacks of smooth rounded boulders. The blue monochromatic images reveal the landscape's otherworldly features. The accessible, versatile, and interpretive qualities of the cyanotype process has allowed me to continue to create work from my apartment during this time of uncertainty. The cyanotype process is a contact printing process where the negative comes in direct contact with light-sensitive coated material. This is different from the traditional darkroom where an enlarger is used and the image is projected onto the light-sensitive paper. There are minimal chemicals used in this process. Equal parts of chemical A and chemical B are mixed together and then brushed onto the paper by hand. These chemicals, when mixed, are sensitive to UV light, so I'm able to work in a somewhat lit room, again, unlike the darkroom. I use the sun to expose my negatives onto light-sensitive coated material. Then I simply use 2 water baths to first develop the image and then to fix it onto the paper. During this time, I lived in a 500 square foot San Francisco apartment and had to expose off of our fire escape. There's a lot of variables when working with cyanotype, and one major issue I came across was the pH level in our water was negatively affecting my chemistry. Luckily, my partner is a home brewer and had previously had our water pH tested. Remembering we had extremely high levels of pH, I added vinegar to the first water bath to balance it out. After a lot of testing, I began creating these cyanotypes. At the same time, a fellow artist in Sweden had contacted me asking if I'd like to collaborate with her on a project. She had been toning her own cyanotypes with different botanicals. I work monochromatically even when working with color and thought the imagery I was working with really lended itself to the toning. The geologic formations themselves are monochromatic, and so I decided to mimic the natural colors of the formations, choosing botanicals that produced grays and browns. The other image on this slide is of a hot spring pool photographed in the summer of 2019 at Yellowstone National Park. This piece is a handmade cyanotype toned with thyme that I printed in April of 2020. So I just used thyme out of my cabinet in my kitchen. The work evolved one final time. Next slide, please. I've wanted to combine my interest in textiles with my photography for many years. I had also been quilting during the shelter in place and thought, well, maybe I can translate the cyanotype process into a quilt. To prepare the image for the quilt, I scan my film and divide the digital image into 8 equal sections to create digital negatives. I coat 8-inch by 10-inch cotton fabric pieces with cyanotype chemistry. Utilizing the digital negatives I have made, I expose each segment of the larger image onto the fabric. After each piece has dried overnight, I use traditional quilting techniques to sew and finish the fabric into a wall hanging, measuring 24 inches by 18 inches. I'd really like to continue this work making the pieces much larger and experimenting more with botanicals. That's more of the pieces behind me. This purple one is actually toned with martyr root. That's why it's purple. The piece on this slide is my most recent quilt that I made a couple of weeks ago. While this time in isolation has been difficult, I have felt fortunate to have been given the time to focus on my work. In addition to my Cyanotype project, I have been photographing and printing in the darkroom again now that our studio has reopened. My solo exhibition, Can We See Time? A 7-year documentation of the shoreline landscape within the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, is currently on display at Napa County Library. And thank you very much, everyone.